The Sultan's gaze lingered on her, filled with curiosity and admiration. What a beautiful woman, he thought. His voice broke the silence. Ah, why haven't I noticed you until now? Ever since I first entered the harem, I knew a day like this would come. But her mind drifted back to where it all began, 11 years ago. She had been born into a family of nomads, a life of constant movement between small villages. Say, her father called out sharply. Ah. Father, that hurts, she yelped, wincing as he gripped her arm. Enough chatter. Come with me. Confused, she asked, Father, what's the matter? They arrived at a clearing, where her father suddenly urged her, Hurry up and bow. Bewildered, she looked up. Standing before them was the Sultan. I offer you my daughter, her father declared. Please accept her. Her young mind struggled to comprehend what was happening. Father? She thought, panic and betrayal flooding her heart. The Sultan barely glanced at her. She looks so young. She probably hasn't even bled yet, he remarked coldly. Throw her into the harem, he ordered. And just like that, her life as a child ended, replaced by the bleak reality of being forgotten in a crowded harem. Years passed, and she learned to survive by fading into the background, avoiding attention. She held on to a shred of hope. They'll regret sending me here. Someday, they'll come back for me. But deep down, she knew the truth. No one was coming to her rescue. 11 years later, she whispered to herself, I'd like to take a bath, but it's a bit too early. Her solitude was interrupted. Who goes there? Show yourself. A commanding voice replied, How dare you raise your head before the Sultan? Kneel. She froze. As Sultan? Your Majesty. He murmured, inspecting her closely. What are you doing alone in the middle of the night? Raise your head. His tone shifted, laced with intrigue. Was there a girl like you in the harem? He turned away, dismissing her presence. We're done here. Let's go. As his retinue left, she trembled. I survived. The Sultan's words lingered. Now I remember. You used to be very young. I have no interest in little girls, so I forgot you were in the harem. But now you've grown into such a fine woman. Her mind screamed, No, this can't be happening. Tears streamed down her face as despair gripped her. I just wanted to live, she whispered. Even though I have no reason to. All she truly longed for was to breathe the air beyond the palace walls, to see the world outside, a world she hadn't known since she was 7. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Your Majesty, a frantic servant cried. The 9th prince has risen in revolt. Please flee immediately. Damn it, the Sultan cursed. Lead the way. As the commotion spread, she made a desperate decision. This might be my last chance to escape alive. The 9th prince was someone she had seen only from afar, a quiet figure who spent hours in the palace library. But now, his rebellion had created an opportunity. The women in the harem will face one of two fates if a new sultan is crowned, she thought grimly. Mercy or death. Under the cover of night, she made her way to a hidden exit she had discovered years ago while wandering the palace grounds. It was usually guarded, but tonight, the chaos had left it unprotected. I might actually make it out. Her hope was short-lived. Stop right there, a soldier barked. Who are you? Are you one of the Sultan's women? She didn't answer, her heart pounding as she ran. The palace gates were littered with bodies, guards who had been slain in the uprising. She knew her fate might soon mirror theirs. But before that happens, I just want to feel the grass beneath my feet, to breathe the air outside these walls. Just once, breaking free from the harem's confines, she stepped into the night air. For the first time in 11 years, she felt the world beyond. Her brief moment of freedom was interrupted by a voice. What is? She froze, turning to see a figure emerge from the shadows. It was him, the 9th Prince Kaner. The warm sunlight embraced her skin, comforting and inviting. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself a fleeting moment of peace. The sunlight feels so warm and cozy, she thought, shifting slightly. I just want to stay here a little longer. But then came the sharp sting of pain.
Ah,
It hurts, she exclaimed, her eyes fluttering open.
blood.
It was her blood. Panic crept into her voice as she whispered, Where am I? Her entire body ached, a testament to the turmoil she had endured. She struggled to recall where her memory had last left off. What happened to me? It came back in fragments, a nightmare of a night, a flood of terror when years of hiding came undone in an instant. She could still feel the Sultan's repulsive breath on her skin, a reminder of her helplessness. And yet, the night sky had been breathtakingly beautiful, a stark contrast to her tragic existence. I've done it, she murmured to herself. It's over now. But was it? Her breath caught in her throat as a familiar voice pierced the silence. You're such a fearless woman, it said mockingly. You should have stayed in the harem, as you usually do. Her eyes widened. Your Highness, she whispered. It was Kaner, the ninth prince. The surreal sight of his presence amidst a scene of chaos made everything feel strangely real. Around her lay a pile of lifeless bodies, the metallic scent of blood heavy in the air. The violence and despair were overwhelming, yet she couldn't tear her gaze away. Her body trembled. The scent of the harem on me, it's revolting. Meanwhile, the palace corridors were eerily silent. The usual bustle of the second-floor hallway, always teeming with activity during the day, had vanished. It feels like I've fallen into a dream, or perhaps a fairy tale, she thought distantly. The harem has never been this quiet before. The stillness unnerved her. Where are the wardens? The other women? A chilling possibility surfaced. Did they all die? But she quickly dismissed the thought. It doesn't matter. I'm not interested in their fate. Let's just go back. Her legs carried her forward, though every step felt like a stumble into darkness. This place swallows me whole, she thought grimly. Every day, I prayed to never wake up again. If I can't escape, I'd rather just disappear. Elsewhere in the palace, tension mounted as the Sultan's fury reached its peak. What do you mean you don't know where Say is? His voice thundered, sending servants into a panicked frenzy. One of them stammered, Why, Your Majesty, please forgive us. We were only gone for a moment to get some snacks because she had been asleep for 3 days. We didn't expect her to wake up now. The Sultan's eyes narrowed. Hassan, he barked. Yes, Your Majesty, came the prompt reply. Is the head of the harem here yet? No, Your Majesty. But if no one left the harem, she must still be inside. Then find her, the Sultan ordered, his tone icy. Moments later, a trembling voice spoke up. Your Majesty, there's something you should know. Speak, the Sultan demanded. There's a room at the northernmost end of the palace. I think that's where she is.
Say.
Yes, that's the name. Recognition flickered in the Sultan's eyes. Then lead me there, he commanded. His voice darkened. And behead every single one of you who left that room unattended. Panic broke out as the servants fell to their knees, pleading for mercy. Your Majesty, please have mercy. But the Sultan's expression was unforgiving as he marched forward, his anger simmering beneath the surface. The dimly lit, worn-down chamber bore signs of neglect. Its walls were cracked, its corners cloaked in shadow. The Sultan's gaze swept over the small, lifeless space. Has she been living here? He muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. A place like this, where not a single ray of light enters, it doesn't suit her. His men shifted uncomfortably behind him. One finally spoke. Shall we search elsewhere, Your Majesty? He shook his head. Forget it. There's no need. As they prepared to leave, one of the guards stepped forward. Sultan, allow me to carry her. Sure, the Sultan interjected, his tone sharp yet quiet. Can't you see she's asleep? His gaze softened as it lingered on her. Let's head back. You close the door. The world seemed too bright when her eyes fluttered open. Everything appeared blurry and surreal. She groaned softly, her senses returning. Your Highness, she murmured weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. A calm voice replied, I'm the Sultan now. This might sting a little. Bear with it. She blinked, disoriented, as she saw the Sultan kneeling beside her. Confusion flashed across her face. "Why are you on your knees, your majesty?" "To see you at eye level," he replied simply. His movements were careful as he tended to the wound on her arm. "There, all done." Her mind raced as she tried to understand his actions. "To think a sultan is treating the wound of a mere girl," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm a dead woman anyway. A few days ago or now, the result is the same. So, it doesn't matter if I ask an impertinent question, does it?" He regarded her thoughtfully. "Why do you think I'm doing this?" Saya's thoughts drifted to the ninth prince, Kaner, a man whispered about in the harem. Women spoke in hushed tones about his ambitions, speculating he might one day overthrow the firstborn prince to claim the throne. She recalled the first time she had seen him in the library. There had been an air of quiet intensity about him, the way he focused on his book, oblivious to the world around him. She had watched him then, unable to look away. If only his gaze had turned to me. Now here he was, no longer a distant figure, but the Sultan himself. His words snapped her back to the present. "Don't you think you'd find your answer if I made love to you?" he asked, his tone unreadable. Her body tensed. The implications of his words were clear, but her thoughts spiraled. "Nothing is impossible in this empire if the Sultan desires it. I've already been through that once. I know what's expected of me." "Yes," she murmured inwardly. "All I have to do is lie down, spread my legs, and wait for the long night to end. What will happen to me after that?" But instead of acting on his authority, Kaner surprised her. "You should rest today," he said casually, leaning back. "The past 3 days have been tough for both of us. Isn't it fine if we relax for a while?" Say stared at him, bewildered.
Why?
Why isn't he doing anything? Why isn't he making love to me? "Are you feeling unwell?" he asked. "And no," she stammered. "You haven't eaten for 3 days. Should I feed you myself?" Her face flushed. "No, it's fine," she replied hastily. His teasing smile deepened. "What did I do to frighten you? Do you think I'm going to devour you?" Later, as they sat in the quiet of the room, he turned to her. "Tell me a story," he said suddenly. "A story?"
Yes.
"The one from the last book you read." Say hesitated but eventually began recounting the tale. "It was about a merchant traveling through the desert and across the sea," she started. As she spoke, the tension in her voice faded, replaced by an almost childlike enthusiasm. Kaner watched her closely. When she tells a story, she transforms into a completely different person, he observed. The merchant feared he would die when he encountered a gang of nearly 200 thieves, she continued. But in that moment, he thought to himself, this must be a chance given by God. Her story was interrupted by his soft voice. "It's intriguing," he remarked, his gaze intent. She looked at him, startled. "Kaner," he said, meeting her eyes. "That's my name." Her breath hitched as his hand brushed against hers. His touch was gentle, and his gaze lingered, holding her captive. "You've got honey here as well," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The heat between them felt suffocating, a strange warmth that seeped into her fingertips and lips where they brushed against his. Say felt as though her body no longer belonged to her. It burned under his touch. His arms encircled her waist firmly, yet the tight hold felt more protective than possessive. How did it come to this? She thought. 10 years gone by in a flash, yet I was always invisible in this place. In the harem, Say had been no more than a shadow among the glamorous nobles. She hadn't belonged, nor had she ever been allowed to stand under the sun like them. She had always been the pebble beneath their feet, unnoticed and insignificant. But now, his touch was sweet, unfamiliar, and disarming. "Majesty," she said hesitantly.
Speak.
"I want to leave this harem as soon as the sun rises. Like the other women," she stated, her voice trembling with hope. He regarded her coolly. "Is that so? If that's what you want, then go ahead." Her heart raced at his words. Could it really be this simple? 10 years of suffering, and I can finally leave this place? Yet, a strange ache surged within her chest, an unfamiliar sadness she couldn't explain. His calm voice only amplified the turmoil. Then he spoke again, his tone uncharacteristically dark. But remember this, I'll murder anyone you encounter after you leave. Anyone you look at with those eyes, anyone you touch, even a child whose cheek you brush out of kindness. I'll cut them down without hesitation. The blood spilled with every step you take will never dry. So go on, say. Try to leave me. She froze, horrified. What is he saying? Later, as she sat alone in a lavish room, her thoughts remained preoccupied with his chilling words. The richly adorned chamber, clearly cared for meticulously, stood in stark contrast to her usual surroundings. Why does he treat me this way? And why did that servant call me my lady? The unexpected respect felt heavier than the meal she had eaten too quickly. Sei felt nauseous, her body rebelling against the unfamiliar luxury. How foolish. I've grown so used to hunger that I can't handle more than a single meal. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Who are you calling stupid? Her gaze snapped up. Your Majesty, she stammered. Kaner, he corrected gently. Didn't I tell you to call me by my name? His eyes narrowed slightly as he observed her curled up in the corner. Why are you sitting there when there's a bed? Just because, she mumbled. Because why? She hesitated before murmuring. It's become a habit. It felt less lonely to wake up in the corner than in an empty bed, no one's warmth beside me. Crouching here made me feel protected, as if the warmth was someone else's. Kaner studied her silently, his expression unreadable. You're not going to tell me everything, are you? He said softly. No matter. We can take our time getting to know each other. His voice dropped slightly as he added, but did you intend for me to leave you to spend this long night alone? Saya's heart sank. He's the Sultan. He can do whatever he pleases. I'm the only woman left in the harem. What I want doesn't matter. His question lingered. Did the former Sultan teach you that? Say shut her eyes, bracing herself. He will take what he wants, and I must endure it. That is how it's always been. But the gentleness in his actions was unexpected. He reached for her hand, noticing how she instinctively clenched it. Don't do that, he murmured, his tone both firm and soft. Your wound will reopen. The warmth of his touch lingered, and Sei found herself trembling. Not from fear, but from the unfamiliar tenderness that made her feel something she couldn't name. It's clear she has never been touched by the sun. Her skin is delicate and fair, almost otherworldly in its softness. Kaner had met countless women before, but never one like her. Saya's body seemed fragile, untouched, and alluringly perfect, as if it were made to bear marks of possession. A low sound escaped her lips as his touch deepened, the sensitivity of her body both surprising and overwhelming her. She trembled under him, her breaths quick and uneven, her heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the tension growing between them. Say, he murmured, his voice low and intoxicating. It wrapped around her senses, making her shiver. His name spilled from her lips, broken and hesitant. Your Majesty. He hushed her softly. It's fine, he assured her. But the sensations were anything but fine. They were intense, unfamiliar, and consuming. Sei was no stranger to the Emperor's chambers, but her past experiences had been devoid of tenderness or passion. Her role had always been clear, to remain still, passive, an object to be used. No one had ever told her this could be different, that it could be something that made her feel alive. Now, every caress, every movement, every whispered word from Kaner was a revelation. Her body responded in ways she didn't understand, and her mind reeled from the sensations overtaking her. She felt vulnerable, unsure, yet unable to resist the warmth that coursed through her veins. Don't hide your voice, Sei, he chided gently. I like hearing you. Her hands instinctively moved to cover her face, but his words stopped her. He pressed further, his tone firm but kind. Would you like me to stop? If you want me to continue, you need to tell me. Sei hesitated, unable to form the words. Her body was betraying her, and the heat consuming her felt unbearable, yet irresistible. Torture is too mild a word for what you're feeling, isn't it? He mused, his eyes gleaming with a knowing intensity.
Tell me, Sei.
Is it just me who thinks this is sweet, or do you feel it too? Stop, she whispered, though her trembling voice lacked conviction. Why should I? Kainer's lips curved into a faint smile. Do you really want me to stop, or do you want this feeling to continue? Saya's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, fear, longing, all battling for control. She bit her lip, the weight of his question pressing down on her. If this heat wouldn't subside, perhaps it was better to yield. He put it inside, she finally stammered, her voice barely audible. Kainer's expression softened slightly as he moved slowly, his touch careful and measured. Relax, he said, his voice soothing. It'll be easier if you don't resist. Her body tensed, unaccustomed to the intimacy. The ache was sharp, unexpected, and overwhelming. He paused, concern flickering in his eyes. Does it hurt too much? Say nodded faintly, tears pricking her eyes. He sighed, his tone softer now. I thought you had been with the former emperor. I didn't realize. His words trailed off, guilt shadowing his features as realization dawned on him. Her reaction, her hesitation, it was almost as if this was her first time. Damn it, he muttered under his breath, berating himself for not recognizing the truth sooner. But he didn't stop. His movements became more deliberate, each one an attempt to ease her discomfort and replace it with something sweeter. Saya's sharp breath softened, her body slowly adjusting, though the unfamiliar sensations still left her overwhelmed. The night stretched on, an uncharted territory for both of them. Kainer held her as if she were something precious, his earlier dominance tempered with surprising gentleness. For Say, it was a moment of vulnerability unlike any she'd ever experienced, one that blurred the lines between pain and pleasure, resistance and surrender. The heat was overwhelming, leaving Say disoriented and unable to gather her thoughts. Her voice wavered, soft pleas escaping her lips as she struggled to adjust. Your Majesty, please, she murmured, her body tense with the unfamiliar sensations coursing through her. Kainer watched her intently, his own mind clouded by the intensity of the moment. He had never been someone's first before, and the knowledge that she was his, completely his, sent a rush of possessiveness through him. She's mine, he thought to himself, each moment deepening the connection he felt. Her soft cries filled the room, blending with the warmth of their shared experience. The intensity was almost maddening, leaving them both teetering on the edge of control. Later, when the haze cleared, Say stirred. A soft knock at the door heralded the arrival of a servant. Have you awoken, my lady? The woman asked respectfully. The Sultan has ordered you to rest for now. Shall I prepare a bath? Say blinked, her mind still foggy. Yes, thank you, she replied hesitantly, unsure of how to navigate this new world she'd stepped into. The servant introduced herself as Enin, a new addition to Saya's life. I'll be serving you, from today onward. Please don't hesitate to call on me for anything. Say felt a pang of discomfort at the title and the sudden deference. I'm not someone worthy of having an assistant, she protested quietly. Enin offered a warm smile. That's absurd, my lady. You are the Sultan's sole concubine now, and you've spent the night with him. Saya's cheeks flushed at the reminder. Yes, thank you, she managed, feeling a mix of embarrassment and uncertainty about her new position. Despite the servant's reassurances, doubts lingered in Saya's mind. The Sultan had a vast harem in the past. Would it be the same now? Would she soon become just another forgotten face? Her thoughts were interrupted by Kainer's arrival. His commanding presence filled the room, and she instinctively lowered her gaze. Say, he said, his tone gentler than she expected. I heard you were awake. How are you feeling? Her body ached as she moved suddenly, drawing a wince. My stomach hurts, she admitted softly. It seems your body is still sore, he observed, concern flickering in his expression. Your Majesty, her voice trembled as she lowered herself before him. Please kill me. His brow furrowed at her words. Kill you? Why should I? Do you think so little of yourself? She shook her head, her voice filled with self-reproach. I am just a concubine. The former Sultan's concubine, not yours. Please, don't treat me like this. Kaner's gaze hardened. But the former sultan never touched you, did he?
You belong to me now, say.
Raise your head and look at me. Reluctantly, she obeyed, meeting his intense gaze. His words were firm, but there was a quiet protectiveness in his tone. The sultan's story was one of bloodshed and betrayal. Once dismissed as the ninth prince, he had no ambitions for the throne. Born of the Tuareg chief's daughter, his mother's death during childbirth marked him as unlucky. His maternal family's power kept him in contention, but he lived in exile until the age of 15. Kaner's return to the palace was met with awe. He had inherited the best of his father's bloodline, brilliant, strong, and unyielding. Yet he showed no interest in the throne, even when his life was threatened by poisoned meals and ambushes. It was his sister's betrayal that changed everything. Erentia, the fourth princess, had pretended to support him but lured him into an assassination attempt. Stabbed and left for dead, Kaner survived and vanished for 3 days before re-emerging, stronger and more determined than ever. 5 years later, he seized the throne with ruthless efficiency, eliminating all threats to his rule. 27 brothers were executed and 19 sisters were imprisoned, ensuring no rival bloodlines remained. When questioned about his swift actions, Kaner had responded coldly. "No one will dare oppose me now." And yet, after all the bloodshed and power struggles, the one he sought was not another political ally or noblewoman. It was a concubine, one whose presence had gone unnoticed by most. "Say," he said, his voice softer now, as if she were the only one who mattered. "Did I not ask you to trust me?" Kaner's voice resonated in the room as he addressed her. "Say, did I not ask you to trust me?" She hesitated before responding softly. "No, Sultan. You are to be my only queen." Saya's expression clouded with doubt as she added, "But I don't deserve that title. I'm not from a noble family." Kaner frowned slightly. "Why do you think that?" "My parents were from a small nomadic tribe," she explained, her voice tinged with shame. "They offered me to the former emperor out of fear. This palace doesn't suit someone like me." Kaner's gaze softened, but his words carried a quiet intensity. "You're telling me to let you go because of that? What should I do if you leave?" "It's only because of you that I became Sultan." Her eyes widened at his declaration. "You must believe me, Say, even if no one else does. I became the Sultan because of you. You are my flower." Say shook her head, struggling to grasp his words. "Your Majesty, how can you say such things?" Kaner smiled faintly and spoke with finality.
"Get some rest."
"You must be tired. You're free to wander the palace as you like, but you are not to go outside the walls. I know you enjoy the library. You may visit, provided Enin accompanies you." Later, Enin stood before Say, helping her prepare for the day. "This really suits you, my lady," Enin remarked, adjusting the ornaments. Say shifted uncomfortably. "Madam Enin, this feels too much for me." Enin smiled warmly. "Nonsense. You'll get used to it little by little. His Majesty has tasked me with bringing you the finest of everything." As Enin adorned her with blue jewels, she added cheerfully, "Blue suits you perfectly. Shall I put your hair up to match these earrings?" Say glanced at herself in the mirror, uncertain. "This doesn't feel like me at all." Enin reassured her. "You'll grow into it, my lady. This is an honor you should enjoy." Satisfied with her work, Enin clapped her hands. "They're all done. Do you like it?" Say offered a faint smile. "It's already too much for me." "Thank you, Enin." As they strolled through the palace grounds, Say marveled at the freedom she now had. "I can't believe I'm walking around the palace freely in broad daylight. It feels like a dream." Her eyes fell on a stunning white palace in the distance. "What is that place?" she asked curiously. "That's Al-Qamar, the Valide Sultan's palace. It's empty right now," Enin replied. "Would you like to take a look inside?" Say hesitated.
"No, it's fine."
"It's so beautiful that I'm afraid seeing it up close might taint it." Their exploration was abruptly halted by a guard blocking their path. "Stop right there. You are not permitted to proceed past this point." Enin bristled at the guard's tone. "Do you even know who she is? How dare you block the way? Say quickly intervened, apologizing softly. I'm sorry. Let's go back, Enin. As they returned to safer grounds, Enin offered to arrange lunch. Shall I ask for lunch to be prepared? Say shook her head. No, it's fine. This has been more than enough. Enin's thoughts lingered on Saya's kind heart. With such a pure soul, how will she manage in a palace full of schemers? She finally understood why the Sultan had entrusted her with Saya's care. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Kaner, his presence commanding the space effortlessly. Say, he called out, his voice softening as his eyes met hers. Her heart skipped a beat. Your Majesties? Kaner's lips curved into a rare smile. Did you come all this way just to see me, Say? Say just kept walking, and before she knew it, she was here.
Ah.
Kisso peck, then she should have come to see her. She's 335 people will, or not. Still, it's embarrassing. She's going to bleed if she bites her lip like that, Her Majesty. From now on, she's going to embrace you regardless of the time and place, but if you continue to act like this when she does, you'll have no lips left. She can't help being shy. Let's go inside. But, Your Majesty, what's wrong? She's not allowed to enter this place. Is that so? Your Majesty. Please, put me down. There's one thing you don't know, Say. The person is not allowed to enter, according to the Sultan. They share the same status. The wound is not serious, so walking is not a problem. The person didn't notice before, but the Sultan smiles more than expected. The Sultan can usually tell what the person is thinking by their expression, but not always. The person claims they weren't thinking about anything important. The Sultan asks the person to tell them what they were thinking just now. The person admits they were thinking that the Sultan smiles a lot. The Sultan explains that they only smile in front of the person and asks if the person has considered that they were the first to be nice to them. The person doesn't always understand what the Sultan says. There is a sweet scent emanating from the person because Madame Enin sprayed perfume on them. The person prefers it when the Sultan doesn't wear perfume. The Sultan asks if the person has eaten yet. The Sultan doesn't appreciate being lied to and wonders where the person learned to lie. The person makes a sound. The Sultan makes a sound. The person makes another sound. The Sultan makes another sound. The Sultan explains that they simply sucked on the person's BRST a bit, and now they're all wet. They exchanged glances. It hadn't even been a day, yet Say was already feeling a tightness in her body. Craner instructed Say to place her hands on the D***K and tried to make her understand through physical contact. Say hesitated, but eventually complied. Craner continued his advances, causing Say to moan and feel conflicted. Despite her attempts to escape, Craner reminded her of her position as a sultana and asserted his dominance. He expressed his desire to impregnate her and claimed that he would do so every day. Say, overwhelmed and unable to resist, succumbed to his advances. Craner saw Say as his possession and threatened to eliminate anyone who tried to separate them, even if it meant destroying the flower in the process. It was nice to see Say eating well. Was the food to her liking? She seemed healthier than before, and that made things more comfortable for her when Craner held her close. It had been a month, and Say was still shy. Craner would need to leave the palace for about a week.
What?
We found my father's location. The former Sultan? Craner was determined to end this situation once and for all. End it? Craner needed to ensure his father's death to fully possess Say. It was hard to believe that Craner, the gentle and kind prince, would resort to killing his own father. What's wrong, Say? I was just wondering if you might end up being alone, just a fleeting thought. Are you pitying me? How could I dare pity you? It just saddens me to think of you being alone. Do you still want to leave my side? As long as you stay with me, everything will be fine. Just stay by my side for the rest of your life, and I won't be alone. Please wait for me. When I come back, there's something I need to tell you. Even though Craner spoke highly of her and treated her well, he never told Say why he valued her so much. He just expected her to figure it out on her own. With the harem soon to be full of women again, Craner would likely prefer someone else eventually. But until then, Say wanted to hold on to this warmth for herself. Hold me like this when you return. I know you don't mean it in that way, but I'll interpret your words in my own way. Have pity on me, please. It's going to be hard not seeing you for a whole week. I know it's going to put a strain on your body, Say. But please have pity.
Look at this.
Everything I've been filling you with all night seems to be overflowing. I'll fill you up again so you won't be empty. Please do so. Do what? I want to be filled by you. You're seducing me, knowing what that means this time, right? Yes, I know. Every time I see Say, it feels like she's going to disappear at any moment. Very well. She's like a fragment of the moon. Did I really get my hands on the moon fairy? Maybe a fragment of the moon broke off and transformed into a human. Are you awake, my lady? Yes, Madam Enon. Did did His Majesty leave? Yes, he left after entrusting me to take good care of you. Her expression looked troubled. Did something happen? Would you like to start the day with breakfast? No, I'll wait to eat later. But it's quite noisy outside, isn't it? It's nothing. Please ignore it. Is something going on? Ladies, you cannot enter. I didn't know this place was occupied. Oh dear. She's using this massive room all by herself? So, this must be the rumored woman who has gained the Sultan's favor? Oh, she's the favorite we've heard about? Greetings. Which family is she from? I heard His Majesty picked up a nobody.
What?
Then she's a commoner? Aren't I much better than her? Ha ha ha. I knew the harem would become crowded again at some point, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. If the Sultan, you're being put to shame. Goodness, how cold. Ha ha ha, you're being too strict. We were just kidding. We simply wanted to get to know her now that we'll all be a family. Enough already. You're all being rude now. I apologize on their behalf. I joined the harem today. I am Minister Albert's daughter, Sijin. Nice to meet you. Nearly 20 women have joined the harem, including me. When a sultan ascends to the throne, it's customary to gift the vassals' unmarried daughters to the sultan. His Majesty abolished that system. He only said that, but he hasn't abolished it yet. So, of course, we must join the harem. I shall call you Say. You can call me Sijin. I want to get along with you from now on. Let's have a meal together sometime. You're not going to decline, are you? Of course. Please call me anytime, Sijin. Say held the string for a little longer, trying to focus. Her thoughts were consumed by Sijin, a dignified woman from a noble family. Kaner would be better off with someone like her. Strumming the instrument absent-mindedly, Say felt a pang of jealousy. How could she feel this way about Sijin, especially when the woman had been so kind to her? The internal conflict was overwhelming. Focus, just a little faster in this part, she told herself. But still, the jealousy made her feel foolish. It was hard for her to bear the thought of another woman by Kaner's side, and it hurt her chest just imagining it. How did the other women in the harem cope with this feeling? Lady Say, a voice startled her out of her thoughts.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. I was distracted. Say apologized, trying to regain her composure. Madam Enon was concerned. Is it because of the incident this morning? Don't worry. Everything will be resolved when His Majesty returns. It's fine, Madam Enon, Say replied. I think I'll go to the library. I miss the smell of old parchment and the dust on the books. As she walked to the familiar library, Say reflected on how it hadn't changed at all. This was the place where she first met Kaner. It had been surprising to see him here at first, as hardly anyone came to this peaceful corner of the palace. Curious, Say asked, is it true that there's a secret place here? A secret place? Madam Enon replied, somewhat hesitantly. His Majesty himself mentioned it. Say felt a sharp sense of unease. Why is she bringing this up? She wondered. Only she knew about the secret place. How could Kaner know? Madam Enon continued, His Majesty told me not to speak about it, but seeing your face, I suppose it won't hurt to give you a hint. 5 years ago, when His Majesty was still a prince, he was gravely injured. I heard you helped him hide here at that time. 5 years ago. Saya's thoughts flashed back to that time. The small library had been her secret haven, secluded from the rest of the palace. Even the caretaker rarely visited. It was a place where Sei would often hide behind the bookshelf, especially when she was caught stealing food and punished. The darkness and coziness of that small, narrow space always offered her solace. No one could find her there. But on that fateful day, the library wasn't empty. She heard a noise and quickly hid. A man appeared, covered in blood, and Sei's heart raced. "I need to hide quickly." He seemed to sense her presence and called out, "Who's there? Come out." "Am I already dead?" Sei wondered, her mind in a blur. "Are you all right?" she asked, stepping cautiously from her hiding place. The man, who appeared delicate and pale, was bleeding heavily. He seemed almost unreal, too fair, too small, almost like a fairy. Sei's mind spun in a haze. Was this really happening? Was he imagining her? Or was it all a dream, brought on by his near-death state?